When I first walked into the office, I immediately realized that there was a spark between us, and the more time passed, the more I became convinced of it. How did my boss seduce me? Enjoy listening. The day I started my new job didn't feel like anything special, until I saw her. I walked into the office carrying a backpack, a hopeful smile, and the kind of nerves that come from starting over somewhere new. I was rehearsing what I'd say to my new team, how I'd keep it professional, how I'd impress my manager. But all of that left my head the moment I saw her. She was standing by the reception desk, talking to someone, wearing a deep blue dress that fit her like it had been designed specifically for that moment. Her hair fell in perfect waves down her back. Her figure was impossible to ignore, graceful, elegant, magnetic, and her eyes, they were sharp, bright, watching, alive. She looked like she didn't just belong in the room. She owned it. For a second, I stopped walking, just stood there like an idiot, stunned by someone who was supposed to be just another person in the office, until the HR guy, the same one who interviewed me, stepped forward and said, "Ah, perfect timing. This is your new team lead." She turned to face me, smiled, and extended her hand. "Hi, I'm Daria. Come with me. I'll show you around." Her voice was calm, confident, a little amused, like she knew the effect she had on people and didn't mind using it. I shook her hand, trying not to look like I'd just been hit by a wave. Even her perfume, light floral, expensive, made my head feel foggy. "Nice to meet you," I said, managing to sound normal even though my heartbeat was punching against my ribs. She led me through the open-plan office, pointing out departments, meeting rooms, the kitchen. People said hi. She smiled at everyone. But something about her body language changed when we were alone. A glance a second too long, a laugh that felt too soft for the joke. The way her hand briefly touched my back as she showed me where to sit. "Comfortable?" she asked. I nodded, too quickly. "Yes, thanks." Her lips curled into something between a smile and a smirk. "Good. Let me know if you need anything." Then she walked away, and I swear, I stared after her for a solid minute before I even logged into my computer. The rest of that first day was a blur. I kept catching glimpses of her across the room, moving with the kind of grace people write poetry about. She didn't speak to me much after that, just a few short check-ins. But every time our eyes met, I felt something flicker. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was being ridiculous, that I needed to focus. But it didn't go away. And that night, when I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Not just how beautiful she was, though that part was impossible to ignore, but the way she looked at me, like she saw something more than the new guy with a slightly wrinkled shirt and an awkward smile. Like I wasn't just background noise in her world. The days that followed didn't help. Daria was complicated, professional, brilliant, demanding, but also warm, attentive. She remembered things I'd said in passing. She laughed at my dumb jokes in meetings. She asked me questions no one else seemed to care about. If I liked the coffee here, if I needed help with the system, if I was settling in okay. Her fingertips would graze mine when she handed me papers. She'd linger just a little too long when leaning over my screen. At first, I thought it was coincidence, then habit. But after a week, I stopped pretending it was innocent. Something was happening between us, and it terrified me. Everyone in the office looked at her. Guys stole glances. Girls tried to imitate her walk, her tone, her wardrobe. But she didn't care, because while everyone looked, she looked at me, and I started noticing the stares from others when we talked, when we stood too close, when she touched my arm and smiled like I was the only one in the room. I pretended I didn't notice, but I did. And a part of me, the part that used to blend in, keep quiet, stay out of trouble, wanted to tell her to stop. But I didn't, because another part of me wanted more. A month later came the company party. An open bar, laughter, loud music, a rooftop view of the city, everyone letting go for a night. Daria wore a black dress this time. It was shorter than anything I'd seen her wear before, and it made my throat dry the second I saw her. We ended up talking on the balcony, just the two of us, for hours. No work talk, No barriers. Just stories, laughter, half-whispers. At some point, we were sitting side by side, closer than colleagues should be. She brushed my shoulder with hers, then didn't move away. And I didn't stop her. We left together. No one noticed. Or maybe no one wanted to. I don't remember the taxi ride. Only the way her hand found mine in the back seat, the way she bit her lip before kissing me, and the way she undressed in my apartment, like she'd done it 100 times in her mind before. The next morning, everything changed. I woke up alone in the bed. She was standing near the window, fully dressed, staring out in silence. When she turned, I saw in her face, not regret, not shame, just fear. "There's something I didn't tell you," she said. My stomach dropped. She held up her left hand. No ring, but the meaning was clear. "I'm married." I didn't say anything at first. What do you say, really, when the woman you've been dreaming about, the woman you just spent the night with, tells you she's married? It wasn't just shock. It was betrayal wrapped in silence. It was a realization that something pure wasn't pure at all. And yet, I couldn't hate her, because the way she looked at me, it wasn't cold. It was broken. She stood by the window like she was waiting for lightning to strike, for me to yell, to throw her out, to tell her she disgusted me. But I just sat there, sheets still tangled around my legs, the smell of her perfume still clinging to the room, my chest filled with something I couldn't name. She whispered, "I never meant for it to happen." I didn't believe her, but I also didn't challenge her, because part of me had known, not the details, but the weight behind her eyes, that something wasn't clean. "You're married," I finally said, barely above a whisper. She nodded slowly. "Yes." There was a long silence, the kind that stretches between two people who both know they've crossed a line they can't uncross. She looked at me, not with guilt, but with something else. Longing, maybe even love. "I haven't felt this in years," she said. "What?" I asked. "This." Her voice cracked. "The way you make me feel. The way I look forward to coming into the office. I try to fight it. I swear I tried." She sat on the edge of the bed, not touching me, just close enough for the warmth between us to mean something. He's not abusive," she continued. "He's just absent, comfortable, predictable, like a couch you keep even when the cushions are broken." That metaphor made me wince, because I suddenly saw what I was in this moment. Not her partner, not her lover, just a new couch. I stood up, got dressed, slowly. She didn't stop me, didn't beg, didn't ask for forgiveness. She just sat there, back straight, shoulders tight, like she was holding in something bigger than both of us. "I'm sorry," she finally said, and it sounded real, but that didn't make it better. It made it worse. At work the next day, everything was quiet, too quiet. We didn't speak, didn't look at each other, but I felt her, every second, the way she turned her head when I walked by, the way her breathing hitched when our hands almost brushed in the hallway, the way she bit her lip when she thought no one was watching. I wanted to scream, not at her, at myself, because I still wanted her. Even now, even knowing. Then came the hallway. I was walking toward the break room to get some water. Narrow space, no one around. She passed by, and just as I moved aside to let her go, she grabbed me by the collar, pulled me into the wall, and kissed me. Hard, desperate, like someone who'd been drowning for years and just found air. And then she let go, didn't say a word, just walked away. And I stood there stunned, heart racing, my mind a storm. Later, I sent her a message. "We need to talk." "Coffee," she replied instantly. "Yes." We met at a quiet place 2 blocks from the office. She wore sunglasses, no makeup, hair tied up, like she was trying to blend in with a world she didn't belong to. "I shouldn't have kissed you," she said before I could speak. "I'm glad you did," I replied. She exhaled sharply, almost laughing. Then she looked at me and said the words that broke everything inside me. "I think I'm in love with you." I froze. She kept talking. I haven't felt this way since I was 16. Since school. Since before life became what it is. I swallowed hard. But what about your husband? She looked down. I don't want to be with him anymore. I've known that for a long time. But I didn't know what to do with that. Then her voice got smaller. You made me remember who I used to be. And suddenly, the weight wasn't just on her shoulders. It was on mine too. Because she wasn't asking me for advice. She was asking me for permission. Permission to end her marriage. To change her life. To choose me. And I sat there, staring at her trembling hands, her parted lips, her unfinished coffee. And I said, nothing. Because I didn't know how to answer. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was overthinking. I wasn't. Not because I was afraid, though maybe I should have been. I didn't sleep because her voice kept echoing in my head. I think I'm in love with you. Those words. They weren't heavy like I expected. They weren't complicated. They were light, like a thread pulling at something inside me I hadn't noticed until she touched it. The next morning, she walked into the office wearing the same blue dress she wore the day we met, and I knew exactly what she was doing. It wasn't just a dress. It was a message, a memory, a reminder the first time I saw her, when everything still felt like possibility, not pressure. Her eyes met mine across the room, and for a second, no one else existed. The day passed like a dream underwater. We barely spoke, but we didn't need to. There was a current between us, a silent conversation in glances, and almost smiles in moments too long to be accidents. Everyone in the office probably felt it. No one said a word. At lunch, I walked past her desk. She didn't look up, but she whispered as I passed. So low only I could hear, I meant what I said. I didn't stop walking, but my heart did. I spent the rest of the afternoon pretending to work while watching a reflection in the dark edge of my monitor. She laughed at something someone said, but her eyes didn't join the smile. She nodded during a meeting, but I saw her fingers twitch the way they did when she was distracted. She was there, but she wasn't, and I knew why, because I felt it too. After hours, I stayed late, pretending I had something to finish. I wasn't alone. She was still there. At 7:45, the office lights began to dim. Security would do their final check soon. She stood up, walked past my desk, and dropped a note without stopping. I opened it slowly. Parking garage. 8 p.m. Basement level. My hands shook, but my legs moved. The garage was quiet. Almost too quiet. She stood by her car, arms crossed, hair loose, no jacket. She looked nervous. I approached, but she spoke first. Tell me to go home, she said. What? She stepped closer. Tell me this is wrong. That I'm selfish. That I'm wrecking your life. I didn't say anything. She looked into my eyes like she was begging me to save her. From herself, from the decision, from the guilt. But I couldn't lie to her. Because everything about her, even her flaws, pulled me in like gravity. I stepped forward, close enough to hear her breath catch. I won't be your secret, I said quietly. She nodded slowly. Then, don't be. And she kissed me. Not rushed, not stolen, but deep, honest, hungry. We didn't go home together that night. Not physically, but something shifted between us. There were no more masks. No more pretending. Whatever this was, messy, complicated, wrong, it was ours now. I walked back to my apartment with her scent still on my shirt. I looked up at the sky and realized I didn't feel guilty. I felt alive, for the first time in years. And maybe that made me a terrible person. But I couldn't bring myself to care. Because even if she was still married, in all the ways that mattered, she was already mine. The next few days felt unreal. We didn't talk about what happened in the garage. We didn't need to. But the way she looked at me, it changed. And the way I looked at her, that changed too. There was no longer fear. Only hunger and fire and this heavy, silent truth between us that neither of us could carry alone. She passed my desk every morning, said good morning like nothing happened. But then her fingers would brush mine, or she'd hold my eyes just a little too long, and I knew She hadn't stopped thinking about it either. At meetings, we sat on opposite sides of the table, but our knees would shift under the surface, almost like magnets pulling each other across the distance. We weren't subtle anymore, but we weren't reckless. Yet, Friday came, and with it, an excuse. Team drinks. Half the office would go. Most would leave after one beer. She came in late. Sleek black jeans, soft white sweater, no ring. She sat beside me, close enough for her thigh to rest lightly against mine. We barely said a word to each other, but every sip of wine she took, every movement she made, it was all for me, and I knew it. When the others started leaving, I stood up and grabbed my coat. "Walking home?" she asked casually. I nodded. "Me too." No one questioned it. We didn't speak the whole walk, just paced side by side in the cold city air. When we reached the corner where we usually split, she stopped. I stopped too. She looked at me, and without asking, without warning, she pulled me into the nearest alley and kissed me like her life depended on it. That kiss didn't feel like cheating. It felt like surrender. We didn't go to her place. We didn't go to mine. We booked a hotel. Small, anonymous, clothes. We undressed each other like we were already late for something we'd been waiting years to start. And after, we just laid there, her head on my chest, my hand tracing the curve of her back, her breathing steady against my skin. She whispered, "I don't want to go home." I almost said, "Then don't." But I didn't, because I didn't know what would happen next. The next morning, she was different. Quiet, careful. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "Let's pretend this never happened." But we both knew she didn't mean it. Back at work, something cracked. She avoided me all day. She barely looked up. When I passed her office, I saw her staring at her phone like it was an execution order. Something had changed, and I knew what it was. Reality. Later that evening, I texted her, "Are you okay?" No reply. Then, hours later, "I'm not sure what I'm doing anymore." I didn't press. I just wrote, "Then let's talk. We don't have to pretend." She agreed. We met at the same cafe. She looked tired, hair pulled back. No makeup, no jewelry. Just a woman who looked like she hadn't slept in days. "I don't know how to leave him," she said. I nodded. "You don't have to explain." "But I want to." And she did. They'd been together 6 years. Married 3. No kids. No fighting. No real anything anymore. Just a routine they both accepted. "I used to think that was love," she said. "Not arguing. Not crying. Just coexisting." She looked at me. "But then you walked in, and I realized I've been asleep for years." I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. "I don't want to be your reason," I said. "I know," she whispered. "But I might already be," I added, and she didn't deny it. The line between right and wrong had vanished. What was left? Only 2 people, lost, wanting, hoping the world would stay quiet long enough for them to figure out. And I knew, right then with painful clarity, I was in too deep, and so was she. It's strange how quickly something forbidden can start to feel like home. How something you're supposed to hide becomes the only thing that feels real. She and I, we didn't talk about what we were anymore. We just existed in it. The world around us, meetings, deadlines, polite conversations in the office kitchen, became background noise. A thin, forgettable wallpaper to the real story that unfolded every time our eyes met. And that story, it was growing, fast. We kept meeting in secret. Hotel rooms, coffee shops in parts of the city where no one knew our names. One time, my apartment, when she said she couldn't bear to go home. She walked in, dropped her coat, and fell into my arms like I was the only ground she trusted to catch her. That night, we didn't even speak. We just held each other until sleep took us both. And when I woke up to find her still there, still asleep, curled into my chest with one hand resting gently on my ribs like she was guarding something, I realized something terrifying. I didn't want to let her go. At work, we danced on the edge of discovery. Colleagues noticed we were close, that we shared private jokes. that she always seemed a little more patient with me than with anyone else. One time, someone asked jokingly if I had a crush on the boss. She heard it. She didn't flinch. She just glanced sideways at me when no one was looking and smirked. But not everything was playful. There were cracks. Nights where she pulled away halfway through a kiss. Days where her messages went unanswered for hours. Moments where she looked through me instead of at me, as if trying to see what came after this. Because the truth was always there, hiding beneath every beautiful lie. She was still married. One afternoon, she told me she'd moved into the guest room at home. He hasn't asked why, she said. I think he knows. I asked her if she'd told him. She shook her head. I can't. Why not? Because then it's real, she whispered. And I'm not ready for it to be real. I wanted to be angry, to demand more, to ask, what the hell are we doing then? But I didn't, because I saw the war in her eyes, not with me, but with herself. And I knew that pushing her wouldn't bring her closer. It would only break her. That night, I stayed up late, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the version of myself that walked into this job just weeks ago. Hopeful, naive, clean. He would never have imagined this. Sleeping with his boss, falling for a married woman, watching her unravel piece by piece, and still wanting to be the one to catch her. But that version of me was gone now. He died the moment she kissed me in the parking garage. The next morning, I saw her in the office kitchen. She looked tired again. Hair in a loose braid. No makeup. Just raw. Real. Did you sleep? I asked gently. She shook her head. I kept thinking about what it would mean. Telling him. Leaving. I didn't ask what she decided. I didn't need to. She stepped forward, looked me dead in the eyes, and whispered, I don't want to hide anymore. That afternoon, she came to my desk, in front of everyone, placed a coffee next to my keyboard. No explanation, no note, just a gesture. Tiny, ordinary, but it meant everything, because it was the first time she acknowledged me without guilt. That night, she called me. Her voice was steady. I told him. My heart stopped. What did he say? He didn't ask who. I sat in silence. And I didn't tell him, she added, because this isn't about you. It's about me. About finally choosing something that isn't sleepwalking. Then she said it. I'm not going back. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't dramatic. Just quiet clarity. The sound of a door finally closing and locking. She came to me again. No rush this time. No shame. She let me undress her like she was handing me the last of her armor. We didn't make love like fugitives. We made love like people who had earned it. Later, lying beside her, I whispered, I thought I was your mistake. She turned her head, eyes wide and soft. You're not my mistake, she said. You're my escape. And in that moment, for the first time, I believed it. She didn't go back. Not that night. Not the next. Not ever. One quiet morning, she packed her things and walked out of the apartment she had shared with her husband for 6 years. No announcement. No screaming match. No final scene. Just a suitcase, a signed lease on a temporary flat, and a line she would never cross again. And she came to me, not as a secret, not as someone cheating, but as a woman who had finally, painfully, made a choice. I should have felt like I'd won. I should have felt elated. But instead, I felt something much heavier. Responsibility. Not because she blamed me. Not because she expected anything from me. But because now, everything we had existed in the light. And in the light, everything looks different. We spent that weekend together. No hiding. No checking the time. No pretending. We slept late. Cooked badly. Laughed for real. She wore one of my shirts around the apartment, like she'd always belonged in it. Curled up next to me with her bare feet on a blanket, and asked what I thought about dogs. And then, suddenly what I thought about forever. I didn't know how to answer. Not because I didn't want it, but because it was all happening so fast. And when something that beautiful arrives quickly, part of you keeps waiting for it to disappear. On Monday, she came into the office and sat in her own chair like she'd just returned from vacation. No one knew anything. She didn't act different, didn't treat me special. But her hand brushed my wrist when she passed my desk, and her voice got softer when she spoke only to me. And that was enough. One night, a week later, she stayed quiet. We had dinner, talked about nothing, watched a movie neither of us finished. But her eyes were somewhere else. What's wrong? I finally asked. She hesitated, then said he sent me an email. My chest tightened. Did you answer? No. Silence. Then she added, he said he hopes I find what I was looking for. That hit harder than I expected. Not because I was afraid she'd go back. I wasn't. But because I suddenly understood the price of what we had. And it was higher than I thought. She rested her head against my shoulder. Do you think I'm selfish? She asked. I looked at her. This woman who had sacrificed comfort, familiarity, a life she'd built. And I told the truth. No. I think you're finally being honest. She nodded, but I could feel it, the guilt, still clinging to her like smoke. Sometimes when we kissed, I could feel it between us, the past, the ring she never wore, the man she didn't love, but still hurt. It didn't come up often, but when it did, it felt like standing in someone else's shadow. Even when the sun was shining just for us. She never asked me for a promise, but I felt it anyway. In the way she smiled at me across my tiny kitchen. In the way she held my hand like I was something fragile. In the way she leaned into me at night, like she didn't quite believe I was real. I wasn't afraid she'd leave me. I was afraid she'd still carry him with her. In guilt, in doubt, in unspoken regrets she couldn't quite shake. And I didn't want to be her new beginning, if she was still haunted by her old ending. But then one night, she said something that broke it all open. We were in bed, quiet, half asleep. She whispered, I didn't leave him for you. I turned toward her, surprised. She looked up at me. I left because I realized I'd already left. Emotionally. Long ago, you just showed me it was okay to finish it. And then she kissed me, not with desperation, but with peace. That night, I finally exhaled. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was true. And sometimes that's all love really needs. We were happy. At least, that's what it looked like from the outside. Weekends together. Inside jokes that no one else would understand. Late night takeout and sleepy kisses. And a toothbrush she kept in my bathroom like it had always been there. It all felt easy. Natural. Like we'd fast-forwarded through the awkwardness and landed straight in the part where everything just fits. And maybe that was a problem. It was all too easy. And I started to wonder, was I just a contrast? She never mentioned her ex-husband after that night. Not directly. No stories. No bitterness. Just silence. At first, I took it as peace. But the longer it lasted, the more it started to feel like erasure. Like if she didn't name it, it didn't exist. And I began to worry I was her escape, not her home. That maybe I was just the air she ran to after holding her breath too long. And one day, when she could breathe again on her own, she'd let me go. I didn't say anything for weeks, but it ate at me in the quiet moments, in the pauses between her sentences, in the way she sometimes stared at her phone a little too long when she thought I wasn't watching. It wasn't suspicion. It was fear that I was the story she'd rewrite later. It was intense, but we both knew it couldn't last. I needed it at the time, but he wasn't the one. Those imaginary quotes haunted me. One night, I couldn't hold it in. We were lying in bed, her head on my chest, the room dim, just the sound of her breath. And I asked, "Do you miss him?" She didn't move for a long time. Then she lifted her head and looked at me, not shocked, not defensive, just honest. "No," she said, "but I miss not feeling guilty." That answer sat heavy in the air. She reached for my hand. It's not about him. It's about who I had to become to leave him. That version of me was sharper, harder, and now I feel softer again. And I don't always trust that softness. I squeezed her hand. Why not? Because what if it makes me stupid? What if I hurt you? What if I ruin this? And that's when I realized She wasn't afraid of me leaving. She was afraid she didn't deserve that I stayed. I sat up, pulled her close, and said the one thing I hadn't said yet. I'm not temporary. She blinked. I know, she whispered, but I might be. That broke something in me, not because I believed it, but because I knew she did. And how do you build a future with someone who still doubts their own place in it? The days after that were strange. We didn't fight. We didn't pull away. But something shifted. We smiled slower, touched more carefully, waited for the other to flinch, like we were walking on glass in a house we built ourselves. And yet, I loved her, not the idea of her, not the thrill of her. Her, in her doubt, in her healing, in her imperfect courage. She was trying, and so was I. At work, things grew tense. Rumors, whispers. People noticed how often we left at the same time, how she always asked me to join meetings that didn't need a second person. I saw the looks, heard the tone, but I didn't care anymore, because what we had wasn't a scandal. It was survival. And if they couldn't understand that, then maybe they never loved anyone hard enough to need them like oxygen. One night, I found her crying, not sobbing, just sitting by the window in my hoodie, tears on her cheeks, staring out like she could see the version of herself she left behind. She said, I thought leaving would make it easier. I knelt in front of her. It doesn't, I said. It just makes it real. She looked down at me, but I don't want to lose you. And I told her the only thing that felt true in that moment. Then stop running for what you already have. And for the first time in weeks, she smiled like she believed it. Not fully, not forever, but enough. Enough for now. We tried to settle into something normal. Weekend groceries. Work lunches that almost felt professional again. Netflix shows half-watched because her legs always found their way over mine. She started leaving a few things at my place. Then more. A brush. Makeup. A hoodie that I pretended wasn't mine just so I could watch her wear it. It should have felt permanent. But there was a shadow in all of it. Not from her past. From her doubt. And mine. One morning, I found her standing still in the doorway to the kitchen, barefoot, mug in hand, staring at nothing. I asked what was wrong. She shook her head, smiled too quickly, and said, just thinking. But I knew better. At work, people had mostly stopped whispering. Mostly. But silence has its own language. A glance here, a pause there. One woman on the team started avoiding me altogether. Another asked if we were okay in a tone that wasn't casual. I said yes. She didn't believe me. And maybe I didn't either. The truth is we were good. But good and safe are two different things. And love, when built on the ashes of someone else's life, always carries heat. We argued for the first time that week. Not a scream. Not even raised voices. Just tension. I said I didn't like the way she froze every time her ex's name came up in conversation, even when it wasn't about her. She said she didn't like the way I went silent every time she got a call she didn't answer in front of me. Neither of us said what we really meant. I'm scared you'll disappear. I'm scared I'm not enough to keep you here. She spent that night at her own place. First time in weeks. She texted before bed. I just needed some space. I love you. I stared at that message for an hour. Then I typed, I get it. I love you too. But I didn't hit send. I waited. And that wait, it was the longest hour of my life. The next day, she came back. Hair tied up. No makeup. Her expression unreadable. I thought maybe this was it. The crash. The unraveling. The I can't do this anymore. But instead, she walked in, stood in front of me and whispered, do you still want this? I nodded. Even if it's messy? I stepped closer. Even if it hurts? She didn't cry, but I saw the relief in her shoulders when I said, yes. She broke down later that night, curled into my chest, sobbing like she hadn't let herself cry in years. And I just held her. Didn't fix. Didn't advise. Didn't promise anything I couldn't control. Just stayed. Sometimes, staying is louder than I love you. After that, things didn't magically fix themselves. But something changed. We stopped pretending not to be scared. We named the fear. We let it into the room. But we didn't let it drive. And that's when I finally understood something. Love isn't the absence of doubt. It's showing up anyway. We still didn't talk much about marriage, or the future, or what it meant to live in the ruins of the life she once had. But every day she came back to me, that was her answer. And I was learning to accept it, even if it wasn't loud, even if it wasn't perfect, even if it didn't look like the love I expected. It was ours. And for now, it was enough. It didn't come as a shock. Not really. We've been walking too close, smiling too long, vanishing at the same times. The office, no matter how quiet it tried to be, was filled with eyes. And eventually, someone decided to speak. It started with an email, anonymous, sent to HR, no names, just enough detail to make everything clear. There's an inappropriate relationship between a senior and junior staff member. If you care about company policy, maybe take a look at their calendars. And their eyes. Petty, cowardly, but effective. I was called in first. A polite conversation behind a closed door. They didn't accuse. Just asked, were we involved? Was there favoritism? Were deadlines adjusted for her sake? I said no, because all the ways she affected me, the ones that mattered, weren't things they could measure. I worked harder because of her, stayed longer, cared more. That wasn't favoritism. That was devotion. They nodded, took notes, thanked me for my transparency. I left the room feeling like my skin had been peeled off. Later, I saw her walk in the hallway, pale, tense, unreadable. They called me too, she said quietly. I didn't ask what she told them. She didn't tell me, but I saw it in her eyes. Something had cracked. Not between us. Not yet. But around us. The protection. The bubble. The illusion that what we had could exist without consequences. That week, everything felt colder. The office. The stairs. Even the way we touched. Only when no one could see. She stopped brushing my arm when she passed. Stopped leaving coffee by my keyboard. Stopped holding my gaze across meetings. It wasn't that she didn't want to. It was that she couldn't. We talked about it at home, mostly in circles. Should we lie low? Should she switch teams? Should we come clean? At one point, I asked, do you regret it? She looked at me, tired, guarded, and said, no, but I'm scared. I was too, not of losing my job, of losing her, of watching the pressure fracture what we'd barely begun to build. On Friday, her ex-husband showed up, outside the office. I was heading home late when I saw them, parked on the far end of the lot. She stood by his car, arms crossed, lips tight. He wasn't yelling, just pleading. I didn't get closer, didn't interfere. But the next morning, I asked. She didn't lie. He wants to talk. Properly. One last time. I stayed quiet. I said no, she added quickly. But part of me wants closure. I nodded slowly. Do you want closure or a second opinion? She winced. That's not fair. But I didn't take it back. Because it was fair. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about us. What we risked. What we already lost. And I couldn't keep pretending I was okay being the afterthought in her emotional war. That night, we didn't sleep in the same bed. Not out of anger. Just distance. I stared at the ceiling, listened to the silence, and wondered, were we strong enough for this? Or just in love with the idea of surviving together? She came into the room around 3 a.m., laid down beside me without a word. Her fingers found mine under the blanket, and she whispered, I'm still here. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a promise. But in that moment, it was enough to keep breathing. The world had found out. We couldn't hide anymore. Couldn't pretend we were just two people drawn together by timing. Now, we were a story, and stories have consequences. But maybe that's where real love begins. Not in the secret, not in the fantasy. We didn't lose our jobs, where you choose each other again. Warnings, even when the whole world says not to. But no one could prove anything inappropriate happened while we worked together. And by the time they tried to, we'd already asked to be separated. I moved to a different project, different floor, different manager. We stopped coming in together, stopped going home together. 2, at least for a while. It wasn't punishment. It was protection. We needed space to prove, to them, to ourselves, that what we had wasn't just proximity or rebellion. It was real. The silence in the office was worse than the whispers. Everyone pretending like they weren't watching. Colleagues who once smiled now avoided eye contact. People who once invited us both to after-work drinks suddenly had plans. She handled it better than I did. Straight spine, calm face, quiet power. But I knew it hurt her. And some days, when she'd close her office door and sit too long without touching her keyboard, I wanted to march in and take her hand in front of everyone. Just to remind them, this woman is human. Not gossip, not scandal, not someone you reduce with a stare. One night, after 2 weeks of separate commutes and forced distance, she called me. Her voice was soft. Small. Can I come over? I said yes before she even finished the question. She didn't wear makeup that night. Didn't bring a bag. Didn't say much at first. She just walked in, took off her shoes, sat on my couch, and exhaled like she hadn't been breathing right since the day it all broke open. I sat beside her, close, but not too close, waiting. She finally turned to me and said, I'm tired of apologizing for wanting something good. And I felt it not just in her voice, but in the way her eyes didn't dart away this time. They stayed on me, focused, unblinking. She added, they can call it what they want. I call it peace. You feel like peace. That was when I knew, not just that she loved me, but that she wasn't going anywhere. Not because it was easy, but because she'd already done the hardest thing a person can do. She chose to stay, even when leaving would have been easier. We didn't get engaged, didn't post photos, didn't update our status, didn't suddenly turn our story into a fairy tale. Because this wasn't a fairy tale. This was the real thing. Messy, earned, built on choices. Sometimes we fought, not about her past. That faded faster than I expected, but about space, schedules, unspoken fears. But we always came back, to the table, to each other, to that quiet truth between us that never left. We didn't find each other by accident. We built this, brick by brick, in the dark, with bruised hands. And no matter what the world thought, we knew. A few months later, she wore the blue dress again. Not for anyone else, just for me. We were meeting for dinner, after work, at the same little place where I'd once asked her for coffee just to talk. She walked in. Same walk, same scent. But everything else had changed. This time, she wasn't my manager, wasn't someone's wife, wasn't a risk. She was mine, freely. She sat across from me, rested her chin on her hand, and smiled. I almost didn't come that day, she said. What day? The day you started. I had a migraine, was going to cancel the onboarding. I smiled. Funny how one small decision changes everything. She leaned closer. No, you changed everything. And in that moment, I didn't care how we started. I only cared where we'd arrived. Together, seen, chosen, the end.